The Afghan Women of Brattleboro is a 6-part podcast series by Two Daughters Productions, produced with support from Vermont Public's Made Here Fund. Learn more at vermontpublic.org/madeherefund.
Previously on the Afghan Women of Brattleboro.
The fight started, and we were not hoping, we were not thinking that some days they would be able to occupy all the country.
You all know the Taliban, they are against the women and the human rights.
He said, "Are you willing to leave your country?" And I said, "Yes. This is the situation. We will rescue. Don't ask us questions. Don't bring anything with you, just you."
I said, "Please give me news about my children. Where are they?"
It was the first time that I heard the name of Vermont. It was a kind of bit very unfamiliar for me. I was thinking, is any state in the United States of America called Vermont?
I'm Melissa Pine.
And I'm Jennifer Sutton. This is episode 2, Arrival.
I came to Brattleboro January 2022.
It was in winter, snow, too much snow and cold, and it was really hard.
I had never imagined that kind of place. It seemed scary because it was in the middle of a jungle with lots of trees.
Oh my God, I want to go back to Afghanistan.
In my country, Kabul, very busy. I thought no one live in here. Oh my God, where I coming? I afraid. No school for my kids, no work for me. How can I do?
That's Sohaila, Neda, Mitra, and Mohammadi remembering what it was like when they first set foot in Brattleboro. In Afghanistan, Sohaila was an activist. Neda was a high school student who was on the national robotics team. Mitra was an artist who co-owned a gallery. Mohammadi was a midwife and a nurse in the Afghan military. They all fled their country after the Taliban seized power in August 2021. Jill Williams was one of the people waiting for them in Brattleboro.
I just couldn't believe that here in this town of 12,000 people, we were developing a resettlement organization and that there would be a significant number of Afghans who needed support and volunteer assistance.
Jill was working with the Ethiopian Community Development Council, or ECDC. It's one of 2 refugee resettlement agencies operating in the state of Vermont. It was also one of the agencies contracted by the U.S. State Department to work on the APA program, Afghan Placement and Assistance. ECDC has branches all over the U.S., and in 2021 they opened an office in Brattleboro. Vermont Governor Phil Scott was all for it.
We should go beyond our borders to welcome more refugees, especially the Afghan allies who served alongside our servicemen and women in the global war on terror. Welcoming refugees is the compassionate thing to do. It's the right thing to do. The truth is, we need them.
That's Governor Scott delivering his State of the State address in January 2022, just days before Afghans began arriving in Brattleboro. He saw refugee resettlement as a humanitarian mission, but it was more than that. When Scott says, "we need them," he's talking about Vermont's economy. Vermont employers needed workers. Refugees could fill jobs. So between January and March 2022, 75 Afghan refugees arrived in Brattleboro. By May, another 25 came. In the following years, ECDC would resettle refugees from other parts of the world: Eritrea, Venezuela, the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
But people from Afghanistan came first. When they arrived, they lived at the School for International Training at the edge of town. SIT, as it's known, had closed most of its on-campus programs a few years earlier. The school opened up a lot of its dorms so the new arrivals could have a place to live temporarily before they moved into their own apartments. This was really unusual. Most refugees in the U.S. end up in hotel rooms or apartments right after they arrive, and it can be really isolating. ECDC only had a few local employees at the time, so they put out a call for volunteers. Dozens of Afghans were on their way. They would need food, clothing, everything.
We could only imagine what sort of circumstances they came from, right? We couldn't know, but we could only imagine and try to be as empathetic as possible.
Leaving Afghanistan was very difficult and challenging for me, and I can never forget the emotional pain. Not only did I leave Afghanistan, I also left behind my family, my friends, and place where I had grown up and built memories.
For Neda, starting over in Vermont was like nothing she had ever experienced. It was the same for Sohaila.
I couldn't believe that I'm landed to this place. I couldn't believe that it would be part of United States of America. I thought that no. It was shocking for me. I thought that maybe I was mistakenly taken to another place. I called my friends in Washington, D.C., Washington State, Florida, Oregon. I called them, I cannot stay here. I wanted to move as soon as possible. They told me, take your time, wait at least 1 or 2 weeks, go around, explore. Probably you might be in the place you really wanted.
A lot happened in those first few weeks. Refugees met ECDC staff who helped them sign up for Medicaid and food assistance. Kids were enrolled in school. A group of retired SIT professors started teaching English classes. Volunteers brought carloads of donated winter coats and boots, and they took Afghan families to the library and sledding.
People, for different reasons, wanted to jump in. Sometimes it was political, sometimes it was guilt, disbelief, or just wanting to provide as beneficial of a landing here in Vermont as they could. I think people have a lot of interest in developing this town to be more diverse. People were excited about this opportunity, that it was only going to grow.
There was only a single volunteer who could speak Dari, one of the official languages of Afghanistan. No volunteers could speak Pashto. Mohammadi, the military nurse, had arrived in Brattleboro with her 3 children, and she was worried about not being able to communicate.
When we didn't understand the language, like a blind or mute or deaf, how can I say my problem for them?
Communication was so sparse at that time, the ability to even go with basic greetings, both in Dari Pashto and in English. So it was more about putting your hand over your heart and sort of tipping your head a little bit to recognize each other with respect.
A few Afghans could speak English. Sohaila was one of them.
When I was talking with everyone, they was kind of afraid of talking to their case managers, the volunteers. They were thinking if they would talk, something bad might happen to them. I told them it's fine. They were telling me, no, it's impossible. Please don't try to talk because it's a different place. I told them, no, it's not a different place. The only problem is that you don't know how should you talk and who you should talk to.
Sohaila, who was a democracy activist in Afghanistan, started translating for the other refugees. The first thing the women wanted was a kitchen. Local businesses and volunteers had been bringing lots of food. Mac and cheese, soup, sandwiches, muffins. It was generous, but the Afghans wanted food that was familiar. The women wanted a place to cook. SIT said okay.
They gave us their big kitchen and the dining room that changed everything.
Sohaila's talking about SIT's International Center, a large building in the middle of campus. It's where refugees were meeting their ECDC case managers, where people were bringing donations. But there was also a kitchen where the women began to cook.
It's where people felt comfortable, where people could express themselves through food or begin easy conversations about the way they would prepare something, talk about their children and their family. Women would come in here and just linger. It became a very communal space.
Morning, lunch, evening, they were going there, they had their food, then hanging out, playing games. Everything started happening from there.
A community was forming. Kids were always running around the dining hall. People talked about home and figured things out together, like how to get the cheapest cell phone plan. The volunteers were hanging around too.
It was about being there. It was about knowing that their children were coming home from school and would be hungry, and offering bananas and granola bars, just sort of trying to make them feel that you're there for them and that you understand some of their needs, certainly a far cry from what's really going on.
The refugees were trying to make the best of a bad situation. But in the bustling space of the International Center, people's stories bubbled up to the surface.
I would notice a woman with just her head in her hands and just doubled over, and this very subtle shaking of her shoulders and back. And as I would walk over to see her, I would think, is this my place to do? But my instinct was, this is a person in pain.
In episode 1, we met women who had to leave their children behind in Afghanistan. Other women had to leave their parents, brothers and sisters, grandchildren. Everyone was missing their homes, their jobs, and their country.
I'm pretty sure all of people who are left their country, they have trauma, especially Afghan peoples, because they left their country in a bad situation, in a difficult situation. When these all things happen for you suddenly, you are not ready to accept all these changes. We have a lot of pain in our heart.
Amid the painful stories and memories, ECDC was steering the refugees through the next phase of the immigration process. There was a handful of Afghans who had worked for the U.S. government, so they had SIV status, special immigrant visas, which put them on the fast track for receiving asylum. But most of the refugees had parole status, which meant they were just starting the asylum application process.
We had a lawyer from Burlington, Vermont, meet with people one-on-one or couples together to understand, did they have the requirements necessary to be fleeing their country. And I remember helping them set up the room, and his wish to have many boxes of Kleenex, because what he was asking people to do was tell their story. This was the time when people might say, my child ran into the street and was shot and killed by the Taliban. People who left 10 children behind to be here. People who left their wife and many children at home, people that left generations of families living under one space. So there was a lot of emotion poured into those interviews.
The Afghans had gone through so much, left so much behind, but they still had to move ahead with their lives. That meant finding apartments and jobs. Neda, the high school student, had arrived in Vermont alone, and volunteers helped her settle in.
Day by day, everything changed. I went to Guildford, such a nice place. It was good. Yeah, and I started a school and also working at Fry's Shopper as a cashier. I was busy with those things.
Most people moved to town in the springtime, and every time somebody left here, there were lots of hugs. People had formed relationships. I think people wondered if they'd ever see each other again. We know this is a small town, and we know you'll see each other again, but they didn't know that.
The people who had moved into apartments actually did return to SIT for a giant party with several hundred people. Afghans, volunteers, ECDC staff. They were all celebrating Nowruz, which marks the first day of spring.
We had a explosive celebration. It felt like one big family. It was unusual to see a family or a single refugee sitting alone.
It was the biggest and the most wonderful celebration ever happened. And there was so many different Afghani foods, so many other Afghani desserts as well. It was all made by Afghan women. They did all of them as a teamwork. We had 24 whole chickens, 16 kilos of ground meat for kofta, and 16 kilos of meat for kabuli palau. Also, 8 bags of rice, 80 kilos. It was kind of a good feeling for us because it was admiring our culture, and it was giving us the feeling of home here. People are supporting you. We are happy to celebrate your celebration, and we are happy to know more about your culture, which is great because in some places people don't value immigrants, even they don't want immigrants in their community. Comparing those places, this was really wonderful.
As the refugees moved into their new apartments in downtown Brattleboro, some of the women got jobs, like Nada at Price Chopper. But many of the women stayed at home, especially those who had children. This new isolation was hard. These women had grown up living with large extended families. Even as they fled their country, they were surrounded by fellow Afghans.
At first, when I came to Vermont, I wanted to create social relation with other families. But I had a very young baby and she was crying all the time, and it was hard to go places for a mother. It is important that when you go somewhere, you should be comfortable and your child should be comfortable.
So in the summer of 2022, ECDC opened a community center. It was in one of the old slate buildings in town that used to belong to the SD organ factory. The center has since relocated to the SIT campus, but its purpose has stayed the same.
The goal of the community center is to provide a welcoming and safe place for all refugees and asylum seekers to come, to provide English classes, calming activities like sewing groups and yoga, informational sessions like childbirthing and driver's ed instruction, trainings for programs that require certificates like early education. It's really to provide skills that allow people to move forward in their lives.
After 5 or 6 months in Vermont, the Afghan women were moving forward, settling into their new community. But the connection to their families back home, it was right there with them, in their hearts, every day. We heard from Kamala in our first episode. She sells her Afghan food at the winter farmers market. She worries about her daughter and grandchildren.
My younger daughter, she's a fourth-year medical student. She is very sad that the university is not starting again. She is the delicate and lovely daughter who has always been by my side. She has 2 children, and my mind is entirely focused on what will happen to them and their future.
All of the Afghan women in Brattleboro are worried about their families. They're worried about their country and all the women suffering under the Taliban regime. They are glad to be safe, but it's hard to be so far away.
My mother waiting for me. At the first, when I left Afghanistan, she asked me when you come back and when I can see you. And I told her 1 year later. And after 1 year, she asked me, it's become 1 year. When you coming? I told her 1 year more. But I don't know what should I say for my mother.
Sometimes my mom, she really worries about me, especially when I first moved here, but still she's missing me a lot. I'm missing her too.
Ziagul, the journalist, and Sohaila, the activist, and other Afghan women who were new to southern Vermont, they share a lot in common. Their religion, culture, the food they cook. But just as they lived different lives in Afghanistan, they're taking different paths as they rebuild in Brattleboro. Some are taking classes and going to work at new jobs. Some got pregnant. Many learned to drive. They started to figure out how to exist in this strange new place.
The journey from one place to another is very difficult, not only for us who have become migrants, but also for people who migrated before us. a person becomes stronger and gains a lot of experience from these journeys. It's good for me. God willing, in the coming years, we will become better and better.
I'm from Afghanistan and I'm proud of my nationality. We are strong women. I think we are the most strongest women around the world.
In the next episode of the Afghan Women of Brattleboro, we hear from young women who came of age during democracy. They went to high school and university. They were starting careers. They were looking forward to their futures. After they escaped from the Taliban takeover of their country, they had to begin again.
Before the Taliban, the life was good for me, for my family, because I had a good job with a good income. Once the Taliban came, everything got destroyed.
Starting from zero in a new place, it's not easy, especially with different language. Learning, work, school, all of this at the same time. I did so many things for myself, for my life. I had some challenge, some hard time, but it's life.
The Afghan Women of Brattleboro is made by Two Daughters Productions, with financial support from Vermont Public's Made Here Fund, Vermont Humanities, the Windham Foundation, and the Arts Council of Windham County.
Thank you so much to all the Afghan women who spent time talking with us. Our producing partner, translator, and all-around advisor is Nagina Azimi. Zia Gul Azimi helped launch the project and did the initial interpretation.
Our voiceover actors are Drukshan Farad, Monishka Bidar, and Behishta Nikufar. Mastering by Dave Snyder.
Thanks to Vermont Public for sharing their studio space in downtown Brattleboro. And special thanks to Jenny Schmidt for providing editorial advice.
To learn more about this story and the other stories in this series, visit AfghanWomenofBrattleboro.org. I'm Jennifer Sutton.
And I'm Alyssa Pine. Thanks for listening.